What's up, everybody? Jerry Scarlato here with another episode of Thriveology 101. And I'm excited about today's episode because today we're going to talk about the number one thing that you can do to improve your fitness past the age of 50. Now, I talk about this because, well, most of our members are over the age of 50, and there's going to be a lot of that going on over the next coming years. The baby boomers are getting older. We're all kind of getting older. That's just kind of what happens. Nonetheless, there is definitely a lot that you can do, but there's one area specifically that you can focus on improving, and that is, drumroll please, the amount of physical activity and movement that you have in your life. Now, I know you're probably not terribly surprised by that answer because, well, we are Thriveology and that's what we do here. However, we also teach people to eat better and to think better and to have a positive attitude and to meditate and all that great stuff as well. However, movement is the thing that has the biggest impact on all of the areas of your body. And in order to help you understand that, we're going to break down 3 of the top chronic diseases that develop as you get older. So let's start off with hypertension. This is high blood pressure for those of you who don't make that connection. Hypertension affects approximately 50 to 60% of people over the age of 50. That's a pretty big number, but it's not terribly surprising. So most people link hypertension to nutrition, high cholesterol levels and other things, which those links are definitely there. However, hypertension is inextricably linked to a sedentary lifestyle. And if you think of people after the age of 50, especially once you get to 65, you move less and less once you get past the age of 50. So up until about 50, most people have kids and they're running around and being crazy and they have to run kids everywhere. But once they're 50, then kids are either out of college or out of high school and they're driving themselves. They don't have to run as much. They don't have to go to as many places. Therefore, they can move less. Once most people retire, they move even less than they do up until that point. With the sedentary lifestyles that we have, that's just what happens. And hypertension increases, or blood pressure increases, partly because you're not moving. A lot because you're not moving. What happens is your arterial walls, they harden, and whenever they harden, it's harder for your blood to rush through them. So that's partly what is increasing your hypertension or increasing your blood pressure. So that is one way that hypertension and lack of movement link together. So getting more movement will definitely improve that. Number 2, let's look at type 2 diabetes. Now, we all talk about type 2 diabetes as, again, a nutritional deficit. And don't get me wrong, nutrition has a lot to do with type 2 diabetes. As a matter of fact, without poor nutrition, you maybe you can develop type 2 diabetes. Once you have type 2 diabetes, what is a great way to improve that? Well, with physical exercise and with weight training specifically, those things improve your blood glucose levels and also improve your insulin resistance. Those are the 2 biggest things when it comes to type 2 diabetes. It is a blood glucose issue. You are building up blood glucose because your body's not able to shuttle it out of your blood. And insulin, your body is not creating insulin as effectively anymore. But with resistance training especially, that will improve those things and will definitely improve your type 2 diabetes. And many people have reduced their insulin intake, and that is another link between physical activity and type 2 diabetes. So that's the second one. The third one that we're going to talk about today are mental disorders. So I'm going to lump a couple of things together. Mental disorders include depression, they include Alzheimer's, they include dementia. So I'm going to kind of link all these together, but I'm going to talk primarily about Alzheimer's. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because yesterday I had the unique opportunity to talk to a group of 65-plus-year-olds. I don't know if that was the best way to say that, but a group of people who are over the age of 65 and they're well into their retirement years. And they had the most questions when I started talking about mental disorders. They started asking about Alzheimer's, which means that's what feared them the most. And I imagine for people over the age of 50, that's on their mind as well. So I wanted to look up some statistics on that, and I found an interesting study that worked perfectly for this episode. So the study broke down people who followed nutrition and their reduction in risk of developing Alzheimer's, and people who had higher levels of physical activity and their reduction of risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So the interesting thing that this study found was the level of adherence to physical activity or nutrition was significantly different to the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So let me explain. High levels of physical activity and high levels of nutrition adherence, meaning eating pretty darn good, improved the likelihood of you getting Alzheimer's disease. For physical activity, that was between 37 and 50% reduction risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. For nutrition, it was between 32 and 40%. So physical activity won out there, not by a big chunk, but by a big enough chunk. On the other end was the low level. So people who didn't have as much physical activity, they had lower levels of physical activity, but they were still somewhat active. And then the lower level adherence to nutrition. So they weren't eating great, but they weren't eating absolutely poorly. This statistic kind of blew me away. So for the low level physical activity, they had a reduced risk of, I believe, 27 to 30% or 25 to 30%, something along those lines. For the nutrition, it was 2% to 14% reduction risk of Alzheimer's disease. So that is a pretty significant change. Basically what that means is you can move less often, and I'm not saying that you should do this, but you can move less often and still decrease your risk of Alzheimer's disease significantly by up to 30%. And the more you move, the lower that risk is, or the higher you improve your odds of not getting Alzheimer's disease. I know that was a lot of numbers I threw at you there, and I want you to know that it is important to do all of these things. I'm not telling you not to eat better. I'm not telling you not to meditate. I'm not telling you to not improve your mindset. That is part of being a human being. However, if you were to focus on one thing, especially over the age of 50, improve the amount of activity that you are getting in your life, especially the vigorous activity that you are getting in your life. That's all I have for you today. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. I know Andy is sitting here waiting for me to move so she can deadlift. Thank you very much, my friends, for checking out this video. And until next time, here's to your success in fitness mastery.